They feared the temptations of wealth. Yet a visitor once described their estate as the kind of place God would have built, if only he'd had the money. They amassed a fortune that outraged a democratic nation, then gave it away, reshaping America. They were the closest thing the country had to a royal family. But the Rockefellers shunned the public eye, retreating behind the walls of their palatial home at Pocantico, New York.
My own personal experience as a child is of a place that on the one hand was something of an Eden. It was serene and beautiful. As we grew up, a number of us began to experience Pocantico also as something of a prison that cut us off from the larger world.
The family found themselves haunted by the controversy surrounding John D. Rockefeller, king of Standard Oil. Vilified as a ruthless predator, as evil incarnate, he had created an industrial empire and a personal fortune on a scale the world had never known.
The great drama for the Rockefellers is to deal with the wealth, to deal with it as a physical fact, to deal with this fortune as growing day by day in a way they can't control anymore. But also they have to deal with the fact of this money as a moral fact. How do you control it? How do you control yourself?
In the drama of the Rockefellers, John D. Jr. was cast in an almost impossible role.
Here was the son of the most controversial businessman in America, who had to figure out, by sheer force of character, a way to change the image and the direction of this family without openly repudiating this father he loved.
In his quest for redemption and respectability, John D. Jr. would push his family to the pinnacle of American power. One of his sons would reach for the highest prize, the presidency, and provoke a new generation's rage and hostility.
There's a million questions that you're going to have to answer, Mr. Rockefeller. Because you and your brothers, you're the ones that are the problems in this country.
For more than a century, the Rockefellers' wealth and influence have attracted both attention and suspicion, and threatened to tear the family apart.
Why do we want to preserve this power? Why do we want to devote our lives to maintaining all these institutions that have been created by the family? What is the purpose of all of this? And I think for many of us, we came to realize that the real problem of life is the integration of power and goodness.
American Experience is made possible by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting. And by the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation. To enhance public understanding of the role of technology, the foundation also seeks to portray the lives of the men and women engaged in scientific and technological pursuit.
Liberty Mutual Insurance is a proud supporter of the American Experience. And by helping people live safer, more secure lives, we're also proud supporters of the American dream.
At the Scotts Company, we help make gardens more beautiful, lawns greener, trees taller. If there's a better business to be in, please let us know.
October 9th, 1901. The steam yacht Wild Duck sailed out of Providence, Rhode Island. On board was one of the richest men in America, John D. Rockefeller, and his family. The boat was bound for an estate at Warwick Neck on the west shore of Narragansett Bay. Soon the groomed lawns would welcome 500 guests, the lions of the Gilded Age. Outside the gates, reporters gathered for the wedding of Rockefeller's only son, John Jr., and Abby Aldrich, daughter of a powerful Rhode Island senator. Pinkerton guards had been deployed to protect the bejeweled guests and glittering wedding presents. They had another, more dangerous assignment. John D. Rockefeller, founder of Standard Oil, was the most hated man in America, described as monstrous, evil, cruel. Rockefeller was hounded by reporters, stalked by strangers asking for money. He had taken to keeping a revolver by his bed. There had been kidnap threats against his family and letters warning of homemade bombs destined for the Rockefellers' house. This was a family under siege. It would fall to the new bride and to the dutiful, obedient son, already oppressed by the burdens of growing up a Rockefeller, to find a way forward for the family. In the early 19th century, they called this part of upstate New York the burned-over district. Burned not by fire, but by fire and brimstone, by the blaze of Christian revivalism. Preachers urged a life of hard work, prayer, and good deeds to build the kingdom of God on earth. It was in the midst of this evangelical fervor that John Davison Rockefeller was born in 1839, the second of 5 children. His mother, Eliza Davison Rockefeller, was deeply religious, stern, disciplined. Even as a young woman, she had not been given to smiles and laughter.
But she had this fatal moment of weakness one day when William Avery Rockefeller appeared on her doorstep peddling cheap trinkets. And he had a little slate that was tied to his buttonhole, and on the slate he had chalked, "I am deaf and dumb." This was part of his con man routine. And Eliza, quite out of character, was immediately smitten by this charming rascal, and in fact proclaimed in his presence, "I'd marry him if he weren't deaf and dumb."
He's a scoundrel. Apparently an enchanting scoundrel in person, and he certainly enchanted Eliza, and apparently enchanted a good many other women too, which is part of being a scoundrel.
Unlike his devout wife, William Avery Rockefeller kept away from the church. He was a traveling man, a salesman who sold quack cures from a wagon out on the western frontier. People whispered about his footloose life. They called him Devil Bill.
He would come and go as he pleased, never with advanced warning. He'd be away for months. There'd be credit at the store. One winter, he ran up a bill in one store of $1,000. In the 19th century, that's an enormous sum of money. But then he would come back, most frequently at night, so people would never know where he came from. And he would tell stories of his exploits that were never quite complete enough to pin him down as to what he had done or where he had done it.
Devil Bill's laughter and music flooded the house. He would be fingering wads of cash, wearing fancy new clothes. He once appeared with a patchwork tablecloth made out of banknotes. I had a peculiar training in my home, John Dee observed of his childhood. It seemed to be a business training from the beginning.
Bill Rockefeller admitted to one of his neighbors, "I do business deals with my sons and I always try to cheat them, to make them sharp." Now, John Dee did not always like those lessons in business, but he absorbed them.
His father lent him money, always at the prevailing interest rate, then deliberately called in the loans without warning to make sure his son had kept reserves. With Devil Bill, John Dee discovered the excitement of taking a big risk, the allure of cold cash. Eliza taught him the sober habits of her Christian faith: thrift, hard work, and perfect self-control.
He was like a little adult. When he went to school, students talked about him being Mr. Serious. And although he had a wonderful sense of humor that was very sly, for the most part, he behaved very rigidly even and liked things orderly the way his mother did. Things occurred according to schedules. And there was a reward for good behavior, and there was a sacrifice for bad behavior.
In 1849, the world fell apart for the Rockefeller family. Bill was accused of the rape of a maid he had hired to work in the household. Rather than confront the charges, he fled, leaving the family alone to face the scandal. It was a moment of intense shame for 10-year-old John.
And I think that it was in the face of the malicious tongues of village gossips that John D. Rockefeller developed this very wary, secretive, self-reliant nature, because people were always whispering about his father, and John Dee himself would not have known the truth of his father, but I think that he felt that he would face down the village gossips by developing this very hard and stoic air.
Eliza and her 5 children found refuge in the local Baptist church. Each Sunday, when the collection plate was passed around, she urged young John to contribute his few pennies. He came to associate the church with charity. A Baptist preacher once encouraged him to make as much money as he could, then give away as much as he could. It was at this moment, Rockefeller later recalled, that the financial plan of my life was formed. But the sound of coins in the collection plate still had the distant ring of Devil Bill.
John Dee came to associate money with those rare times that father came home flush with cash from the road, and that the Rockefellers briefly functioned as a real family. And I think the fact that John Dee grew up in this perpetually insecure situation, wondering when father would come home, wondering if they would pay off the credit at the general store, created a person who had an abnormal need not only for a large amount of money, but for constant security, and somebody who disliked surprises, somebody who wanted to master chance and outwit fate.
Fate delivered John Dee one more bitter surprise. He soon discovered that his father had taken a second wife, under an assumed name. Shielding his mother from the shame, John kept the bigamy a secret. To carry on his double life, Bill moved the family to Cleveland. Then he disappeared again, leaving them alone in the new city.
And this turned relations between John D. and his father stone cold. I think in the long run, it had the effect of leading John D. to decide to make a life for himself that was as different from his father's as he could manage, without quite abandoning things that he still thought of value in what his father had taught him, like business.
John had hoped to go to college. Now he dropped out of high school and started looking for work to help support the family. I did not go to any small establishments, he recalled. I was after something big. He found a job as an assistant bookkeeper, but threw himself into it with missionary intensity.
As soon as he starts working, there's nothing lighthearted or carefree about this young 16-year-old boy. He closely reviews every bill and jumps on errors of even a few pennies in the bill. He's amazed at the laxity and inefficiency of these much older bosses who are much more experienced. And I think that that was the thing that distinguished Rockefeller from an early age. Not so much brilliant, flashing intelligence, but this thorough, plodding, systematic way that he did things.
John began to keep a ledger, noting every expenditure, large and small. For him, numbers were sacred.
John D's ledger took on a special role of being a kind of conscience, I would say. He recorded his contributions to various causes, to church, every penny that he gave to a poor little girl he saw on the street, to abolitionist causes. And he would use this throughout his life as a way of evaluating himself.
Line upon line, as his earnings grew, his ambition quickened. He borrowed $1,000 from Devil Bill, with interest, and plunged into the risky business of commodity trading, buying and selling meat and grain. He was just 18. Only a year later, the something big he was looking for surfaced in the backwoods of Pennsylvania. Oil, to grease the wheels of America's infant industries. Oil, to fuel an explosion of growth. News of the discovery unleashed pandemonium as thousands of speculators descended upon the region. Overnight, wildcatters stripped away whole forests and put up thousands of rickety derricks, hoping to strike black gold. As the oil gushed skyward, fantastic stories appeared of instant fortunes. Among the Cleveland businessmen lured to the region was John D. Rockefeller. He was no wildcatter. He saw that drilling for oil was a very risky business. Refining, not drilling, he decided, was where the steady money was to be made. Soon, a new rail line linked Cleveland with the oil region. Rockefeller built his refinery right beside it. It was one of the first in the city to produce kerosene, a new fuel for lamps that was cheap and clean. The poor man's light, as John D. called it, would bring a brilliant glow into American homes. The soaring demand for it, he was convinced, would make him rich. I shall never forget how hungry I was in those days, he later wrote. I ran up and down the tops of freight cars. I hurried up the boys. Obsessed with the business of oil, he mastered every detail, develop new products to sell. By age 25, his refinery was one of the largest in the world.
He really mortgaged his life up to the hilt. He borrowed tens of thousands of dollars, which is the equivalent, of course, of millions today. He had the strength of this vision that this was where his destiny was, and this is where the destiny of this country was. The country was going to kind of ride to greatness on this tidal wave of oil. And he constantly felt that he would inevitably triumph in some fundamental way.
He honestly believed that he had a calling to make money, and that it was a gift that had been bestowed upon him by God, just as some people could sing opera and other people could paint beautifully. He had a particular aptitude for acquiring wealth, and he considered it a God-given gift.
John Dee tended his faith as carefully as his business. As a lowly clerk, he paid for a slave's freedom and gave to a Catholic orphanage. As he grew rich, his donations grew more generous, especially for his church in Cleveland.
He falls in love with this church. He sweeps the chapel. He rings the bell. He lights the candles. He teaches in the Sunday school. He seems to find in the church a refuge from the sort of sin that he has encountered with his father.
Soon, John was drawn to a young woman as devout and determined as he was.
Laura Spellman was an 1840s, 1850s feminist. She was the valedictorian of her high school graduating class, the same class that John Dee was in. And the title of her address was, "I Can Paddle My Own Canoe." And it was a plea for women's suffrage in 1855.
When John courted her, it was very different from the other young men of her set who were also after her, who would see her at balls and parties. He'd come to her house, and they might play a little piano together, but then they would often sit down with his ledger books and go over them together. And she apparently found them just as interesting as he did.
On September 8th, 1864, John and Laura were married in a small private ceremony.
My great-grandmother was a figure who perhaps had a bit of hell and brimstone in her philosophy, who basically believed through deeds you go to heaven, and therefore you could very likely go to hell if you weren't properly motivated and properly achieving.
Like his devout mother, Laura strengthened John's sense that he was doing God's work, not only in church, but also in business. Rockefeller's future, however, was harnessed to an industry in trouble. So many wells were flowing, he lamented, that the price of oil kept falling, yet they went right on drilling. He saw an industry plagued by overproduction, and his own success threatened by what he described as ruinous, cutthroat competition.
John Dee was shrewd enough and he was analytical enough that he realized that in order to figure out a way to save his own firm and his own newly won fortune, that he had to figure out a solution for the entire industry. It was at that point that John Dee began to conceive of the oil industry as one big interrelated mechanism. And you couldn't just change one component, you had to control the entire machine.
In a move that would transform the American economy, Rockefeller set out to replace a world of independent oil men with a giant company controlled by him. In 1870, begging bankers for more loans, he formed Standard Oil of Ohio. The next year, he quietly put what he called Our Plan, his campaign to dominate the volatile oil industry, into devastating effect. Rockefeller knew that the refiner with the lowest transportation cost could bring rivals to their knees. He entered into a secret alliance with the railroads called the South Improvement Company. In exchange for large, regular shipments, Rockefeller and his allies secured transport rates far lower than those of their bewildered competitors. Ida Tarbell, the daughter of an oil man, later remembered how men like her father struggled to make sense of events. An uneasy rumor began running up and down the oil regions, she wrote. Freight rates were going up. Moreover, all members of the South Improvement Company, a company unheard of until now, were exempt. Nobody waited to find out his neighbor's opinion. On every lip, there was but one word, and that was conspiracy.
What it really represented was the face of monopoly. It immediately became clear that the entire nature of the enterprise was going to change in ways that spelled their doom. And so there was a shock of recognition that they were going to be left behind and that a whole world that had been opened up to them was soon to close.
The image that was always used was that of the anaconda, the squeezing python-like grips of this economic snake that was just taking individual entrepreneurs and just putting them out of business and reducing them to kind of economic strait where they had no alternative but to sell out to the principals in this conspiracy. It was a conspiracy, really. It was one of the first great economic conspiracies in this country.
In an effort to thwart the scheme, many independents refused to sell crude oil to Rockefeller and his associates. Undaunted, Rockefeller used the threat of the South Improvement Company to intimidate his rival refiners in Cleveland. His brother and business partner William characterized the plan as war or peace, sell out to Standard Oil or suffer the consequences. At first, they approached their targets with deference and flattery. Rockefeller himself used his own considerable talent for persuasion, presenting Standard Oil as a brotherhood based on cooperation.
He had this missionary faith that he was destined to guide this industry. And when he took over his rivals, he not only wanted their plans, he often wanted the managers. So it was not in his interest to alienate them. He much preferred convincing people to sell to him voluntarily rather than trying to squeeze them through terror tactics. Although if necessary, he would resort to very rough methods in order to soften them up, or he used a phrase to give them a good sweating before he negotiated with them.
Rockefeller might create a shortage of the railroad tank cars that transported oil. He might go out and buy up all the barrels on the market, so a competitor would have no place to store his oil or ship it. He would even buy up all the available chemicals that were necessary to refine oil. Rockefeller instructed Standard Oil men to communicate in code. The company was nicknamed Club. John D. Rockefeller was referred to as Chowder. Many of Rockefeller's targets had no idea that the local refiners who were slashing prices and acting like competitors were actually part of Rockefeller's growing empire. In just 2 months, he had taken over 22 of the 26 Cleveland refineries, revealing the single-minded drive that would make him both the wonder and the terror of American business.
Nobody knew what he sounded like. Nobody had heard him. He walled himself off. And the people who did know him, though, the people who did find him ruthless, had reason to find him ruthless, because you come up against someone who has no self-doubts, who has a vision, and who has no qualms about achieving that vision because he doesn't think he's doing wrong. Once he made his mind up, you might as well sell your company because it was going to be part of Standard Oil.
Methodically, secretly, John D. Rockefeller was doing more than transforming a single industry. He was changing forever the way America did business. The day of combination is here to stay, he declared. Individualism has gone, never to return.
By 1879, when Rockefeller is 40, he controls 90% of the oil refining in the world. Within a few years, he will control 90% of the marketing of oil and a third of all of the oil wells. So this very young man controls what is not only a national but an international monopoly in a commodity that is about to become the most important strategic commodity in the world economy.
Rockefeller relished time spent with Laura. After the birth of their first child, Elizabeth, they moved to Euclid Avenue, Cleveland's Millionaires' Row. Although Rockefeller could have afforded any mansion on the street, he deliberately picked a more modest house, where his 3 remaining children were born: Alta, Edith, and his only son, John Jr. Convinced that riches led to sin, Rockefeller, now one of America's richest men, faced a difficult task in raising his children.
They seemed a bit afraid of this wealth, and they felt they should continue to live as they had in the past, with very simple wardrobe, children sharing toys, children earning allowances, that this was an important part of building character and continuing the virtuous life, that to in some way give in to too much luxury would lead one astray.
Laura compelled young John to wear his sister's remade hand-me-downs until he was 8. She once proudly confided to a neighbor, "I am so glad my son has told me what he wants for Christmas, so now it can be denied him." After she was diagnosed with consumption, the Rockefellers began to spend more time at Forest Hill, their 79-acre estate outside of Cleveland. Despite its grand facade, he insisted the interior remain bare of all signs of luxury or pretension. Money, Junior recalled, was something there like air or food or any other element, yet it was never easily attainable.
In the setting where all this frugality and restraint was practiced in the household, he was surrounded by hundreds of acres of gardens, lakes where they could ice skate, every outer manifestation of wealth. And then in the intimate family setting, he was being raised like a poor little kid.
To earn pocket money, Junior mended doors, killed flies, and sharpened pencils, dutifully keeping track of every penny in a ledger, just like his father. He attended prayer meetings and recited temperance slogans without complaint. By age 10, he had signed a solemn oath that he would abstain from tobacco, profanity, and the drinking of any intoxicating beverages. Junior and his sisters were constantly pushed by their mother to cleanse their souls of sin.
Every Sunday afternoon, Laura would sit down with the children and they would discuss what she called their ill-conceived actions of the week. And that were the besetting sins. And the idea was to examine what they did and basically ask forgiveness and analyze how they could improve their behavior for the next week.
The most important lesson that she taught the children was, what is your duty? And that is what is to guide your life. Service to others. You are not here just for your own enjoyment or even just simply to pray. You have a purpose beyond that.
Laura was the disciplinarian in the family, and John D. Sr., a doting, cheerful, indulgent father. He plays with his children, his son, teaches them to skate. When they're a little older, he ties a white handkerchief to the back of his belt and he leads the kids on bicycle chases across his estate.
Rockefeller led his children through the winding roads at Forest Hill, revealing a boyish excitement that few outsiders ever saw. He loved to play games, electrifying the children with daring feints, sudden thrusts, and unexpected wheeling turns, followed by whoops of delight when he won. Junior recalled, "Father never told us what not to do. He was one with us." Although Rockefeller was a merry companion for his children, he and Laura kept them cut off from the outside world. "We went rarely, practically not at all, to neighbors' houses," John Jr. remembered. "We had no childhood friends, no school friends." The austerity drilled into John D. by his mother Eliza still reigned in the Rockefeller family. At age 76, immobilized by a stroke, she died with her eldest son at her side. She never knew her husband had taken a second wife. Rockefeller expected his estranged father to attend the funeral. When Devil Bill failed to show, it was the last straw.
The day before Eliza's funeral, John D. instructed the preacher to describe his mother as a widow. This was part of his revenge. He was editing his father out of existence. And he never forgave his father, and he distinctly left the impression with people in subsequent years that his father was dead.
In 1883, Rockefeller moved his family to New York, the center of America's burgeoning industrial economy. The king of Standard Oil now set out to transform his company into something bigger and more powerful than anything the world had ever seen. Rockefeller reigned over a patchwork of companies, cumbersome to manage. He was looking for a way to skirt a law that then prohibited combining the operations of businesses in different states. His solution was to have stockholders in 40 companies secretly trade in their shares for certificates in a Standard Oil trust. The trust became a corporation of corporations. Rockefeller had devised an ingenious legal shield. Behind it, he could command his vast business empire, smoothly and in complete secrecy. In 1885, he moved Standard Oil into an imposing granite fortress near Wall Street. 26 Broadway soon became the world's most famous business address. It was also a hated symbol of a monopoly so powerful that no law seemed able to control it.
Small businessmen, middle-class Americans, people who were independent, who were used to believing that hard work and determined effort was the way to success, looked at corporations like the Standard Oil with their unprecedented size and felt afraid. And so feeling ran extremely high and the hostility was intense.
Rockefeller saw himself as a prophet of a new order. He called it cooperation. His critics called it monopoly. His company would be the world's first great multinational corporation, efficient and stable, with vast economies of scale.
During the first 20 years of Standard Oil, John D. Rockefeller managed to lower the price of kerosene from 23 cents a gallon to 7 cents a gallon, and he managed to improve the quality of the product at the same time. He was a monopolist. He was a rough and often unscrupulous monopolist, but he was also a very smart and enterprising businessman. There was nothing complacent about him, and it was one of the ways that he was able to justify these rough methods to himself.
Rockefeller had wanted to remain invisible, but he wielded such power that he became a magnet for suspicion. Hearings, investigations, and lawsuits began to challenge the Standard Oil empire. John D. was called to testify in one forum after another.
He was a kind of difficult witness to kind of pin down, because on the one hand, he was verbally fairly clever, actually, and keen in terms of his ability to kind of listen to the questions. When he was being investigated about the South Improvement Company, for instance, one interrogator said something about the Southern Improvement Company, and he seized upon that misnomer to say, and John D. said, "I wasn't part of that."
One reporter described 26 Broadway as a cave for pirates, a den for the cutthroats of commerce. Reporters who eluded the security guards encountered doors with special locks. The trick was to twist the rim with thumb and forefinger before turning the knob. If a trespasser did not know the secret, he could find himself trapped between locked doors. Half of America seemed willing to lynch Rockefeller. The other half wanted a loan.
He received on average 50 to 60,000 letters a month asking for help. Dozens of people followed him in the street. Literally, crowds stood around the Standard Oil offices, waiting for him to come out. Little children, painfully thin, crying in the street and so on. Rockefeller felt overwhelmed.
By 1889, John D. pegged his fortune at more than $40 million. He had always been a generous man, but at the same time, loath to waste a penny. He hired Reverend Frederick Gates, a Baptist minister, to help him forge a new set of principles for philanthropy.
Senior began very seriously to rethink not just the vehicles, but the purposes of charity. Charity as a way of remaking society and not ameliorating evil. So cure scarlet fever. Don't provide another scarlet fever ward in a children's hospital. Find a more productive way of growing corn rather than making a soup kitchen. He was ahead of his time then, he still is.
In the coming years, Rockefeller would fund the education of black women at Spelman College in Atlanta, found the University of Chicago, the Midwestern equivalent of the Ivy League, support groundbreaking medical research, and public health campaigns. Frederick Gates pushed him on, warning, "Mr. Rockefeller, your fortune is rolling up like an avalanche. You must distribute it faster than it grows. If you do not, it will crush you and your children and your children's children." Already strained by the demands of making money, Rockefeller now staggered under the new pressures of giving it away. I investigated and worked myself almost to a nervous breakdown, he said, in groping my way through the ever-widening field of philanthropic endeavor. Suffering from chronic stomach problems, Rockefeller took time off from work and retreated to Forest Hill. To regain his health, he worked outdoors, rode his bike, and ate simply. By the end of the summer, he had gained 15 pounds. Still, he resisted returning to work and now contemplated something unthinkable: retirement.
Here he was this wealthy person with great power. And in his mid-50s, he gave it all up. Now, in the history, I've never seen anybody do anything like that and then be happy without it, see. Incredible wholeness and self-sufficiency, see. Power, money, status, position were no longer important to him.
In 1897, John D. Rockefeller retired from Standard Oil, keeping the presidency in name only. No public announcement was made. Few Americans realized that the man they believed responsible for running the most powerful corporation on earth had surrendered the reins. When asked why Rockefeller retained the president's title, one senior director explained, "He had to keep it. Cases against us were pending in the courts, and we told him that if any of us have to go to jail, he would have to go with us." As the only son and heir, John D. Rockefeller Jr. carried a heavy burden. From an early age, he had been taught that the responsibilities of the family fortune and name would be his to bear. By age 18, he had suffered 2 nervous collapses.
John D. Rockefeller Jr. has some really rather impossible tasks ahead of him, because by the time he comes of age, his father has been successful beyond anybody's wildest dreams, including his own, to the point where the son cannot possibly match the father. Moreover, he is certainly familiar with the proverb of those to whom much has been given, much shall be required. And by the time he comes into his own, he realizes he's been given more than anybody else. So that, of course, from him shall be required more than anybody else.
Intensely conscientious, Jr. entered Brown University in September 1893. He still wrote all his expenses down in a ledger and mended his own clothes. Slowly, however, he began to wean himself from his strict upbringing. For the first time in his life, he went to the theater, enjoyed football games, and even once smoked a pack of cigarettes. To the horror of his mother, he learned to dance. Soon he met Abby Aldrich, a popular Providence girl, undaunted by his name or his money.
Abby Aldrich, because she was raised in a liberated, relaxed, artistic family, was like an injection of dynamism and interest in the larger world, which John had been shielded from.
Abby's father, Nelson Aldrich, was a controversial United States senator from Rhode Island. He was fiercely criticized by the press for being the prime power broker of the great trusts. Jr. admired Abby's ability to be loyal to her father and ignore the criticism he attracted. As he approached graduation, he still worshipped his own father and was deeply wounded by relentless attacks in the press. In 1897, fresh out of college, Junior went to work for Standard Oil. My one thought from the time I was a boy, he recalled, was to help my father.
When he got there, nobody bothered to tell him how he was expected to help. He was given a desk, he was given a salary, he was given some miscellaneous chores, but nobody told him what was expected of him. He had to find out for himself where his place in the world was. And perhaps that's what Senior had in mind, was letting him find his own way. But in this case, it made life more difficult for the son.
Anxious to succeed at something, Junior tried investing. He trusted the advice of a shady Wall Street speculator. Suddenly, cautious Junior lost $1 million of his father's money.
He went to see his father with what must have been a terrible churning sensation in his stomach. His father reacted very patiently. John D. Sr. asked him a lot of questions, and instead of in any way scolding or reprimanding him, at the end says, "All right, John, I'll take care of it." He saw that his son was flagellating himself about this incident and that there was no need punishing a son who was so clearly punishing himself.
Fearing the family's vast fortune would overwhelm his son, Senior begged Junior to relax. Laura, however, pushed him forward. "You are the son of the King of Kings," she reminded him, "and so you can never do what will dishonor your father or be disloyal to the king." Junior anguished over whether to marry Abby, and for 4 years prayed every day for divine guidance. Gently, his mother ended his agony, saying, "Of course you love Miss Aldrich. Why don't you go at once and tell her so?" That fall, the freewheeling Senator Aldrich invited guests to an extravagant wedding. In private yachts, the elite of Gilded Age society descended on his Rhode Island estate. Many in the press saw this union of money and political power in dark terms. One reporter warned, "The chief exploiter of the American people is now closely allied by marriage with the chief schemer." For the austere, controlled Rockefellers, Junior's new wife would be a liberating influence.
When they're first married and Junior says, "Well, you'll have to keep a ledger," she just says, "No, I won't." And when he gives her $1,000 as a wedding present, a rather interesting act in itself, she gives it to the YWCA in Providence. So immediately you see she's going to assert herself.
Abby joined the Rockefellers as they were about to enter the most painful moment in their history. Her husband would soon find himself in the harsh light of public scrutiny, alongside his father.
When John D. was in his 50s, his hair started to fall out and his mustache began to fall out. And suddenly in 1901, all of his body hair fell out, not just from his head, all over his body. And this was a very crushing and humiliating thing to suffer from, because when you see photographs of him completely bald in the early 1900s, he looks like he could be in his 70s or 80s.
Rockefeller had looked forward to the end of his long career. But now, the scandal surrounding his rise to power would be resurrected in haunting detail. Rockefeller and Standard Oil were about to be investigated by a vigorous new president, Theodore Roosevelt, and an increasingly assertive press. In 1901, the managing editor of McClure's magazine, Ida Tarbell, decided to research America's most secretive businessman. She began her investigation with an emotional journey back to Pennsylvania, where oil men like her father and brother had fought Standard Oil. Here she talked with legions of Rockefeller enemies. The task confronting me is a monstrous one, she wrote. I dream of the octopus day and night and can think of nothing else.
When Ida Tarbell started writing the series, Rockefeller didn't realize how powerful the press had become in an age when Joseph Pulitzer and William Randolph Hearst had mass newspaper chains. Didn't realize the new sophistication of muckrakers like Ida Tarbell, who were capable of taking a very complex subject, slicing it open, and really dissecting a person's life or an institution.
In 1902, Tarbell's revelations gripped the nation. She brought to life a drama in which independent oil men were crushed by the mighty Standard Oil. She documented the monopoly's collusion with the railroads, the kickbacks and shady dealings. She exposed the sweatings and crushings, the spies and codes, the secret ownership of supposed rivals. There was not a lazy bone in the organization, not an incompetent hand or stupid head, she wrote. But they had never played fair, and that ruined their greatness for me.
Because the series was such a great success and the circulation of McClure's kept jumping up, they allowed the series to run to 19 installments. And what happened with each installment was not only did the audience grow larger, and Teddy Roosevelt was avidly reading it and writing fan letters to Ida Tarbell, a lot of news sources were coming out of the woodwork as it went on, and so that there was a tremendous crescendo, and the public kept getting angrier and angrier at Rockefeller.
President Theodore Roosevelt denounced him as a lawbreaker. Novelist Leo Tolstoy cried out that no honest man should work with him. Rockefeller was called a pirate, a buccaneer, a robber baron. He received torrents of abusive mail, even death threats. Still, he refused to answer any of the charges leveled against him. From his mother's silence in the face of family scandal, he had learned, as he put it, to let the world wag.
I think if he had responded early to the Tarbell series, the wave of press and political denunciation might have subsided a bit. But Senior knew that he could respond to some things in the series and say that's just not true. And he also knew that there were plenty of other things that were true. About the rebates, about the bribing, and so on. So I think he probably, in the end, knew that he had no choice.
Tarbell traveled to Cleveland to glimpse the Titan at one of his rare public appearances at the Euclid Avenue Baptist Church. There was an awful age in his face, she observed. The oldest man I have ever seen. Mr. Rockefeller may have made himself the richest man in the world, but he has paid. Nothing but paying ever plows such lines. Tarbell described Rockefeller's agitated behavior, the way he was searching the aisles for possible enemies. Mr. Rockefeller, she concluded, for all his conscious power, was afraid of his own kind.
She then capped the 19-part series with a 2-part character study where she described Rockefeller as hideous and leprous in appearance, and that actually wounded him much more than her expose of his business methods. He felt that it was very unfair to have portrayed him in this ghoulish fashion and to make the fact that he had lost all his hair somehow proof of his depravity.
The most painful blow, however, was Tarbell's exposure of Rockefeller's father as a snake oil salesman bigamist, and accused rapist. The discovery that Devil Bill was still alive set off a nationwide manhunt. One newspaper publisher offered $8,000 for information about him. Rockefeller began to fear that his children might be kidnapped.
Ida Tarbell really took a toll on the family. John Jr. certainly had what could only be described as a really catastrophic nervous breakdown. Sr. had serious, continuous stomach ailments. His wife was ill. So I think that the whole family, not just Sr., was reacting to what they saw as a body blow.
Isolated and discouraged, John D. Rockefeller Jr. confided to his Bible class, "I've never had more occasion to seek the sympathy of friends. All the money in the world will not take the place of friends." Riches, the young heir warned his pupils, breed but sin.
This must have been an especially distressing period because as he's working at Standard Oil, he has a lot of contact with his father's hand-picked successor, John D. Archbold, who's engaged in an enormous amount of political corruption. And so I think that the Tarbell series is especially distressing because he wants desperately to believe in his father's innocence, and yet he's increasingly disturbed at 26 Broadway by the sordid atmosphere of Standard Oil, which meant that on some level he must have suspected that a lot of these things were true.
Adrift at Standard Oil, Jr. threw himself into building a new home for his father. Located at Pocantico Hills, 30 miles north of New York City, the site was called Kijket, Dutch for lookout. It had a panoramic view of the Hudson River. Soon it became a haven for the family. Outside its walls, reporters gathered, demanding answers. For Junior, facing a hostile public became increasingly difficult as he and Abby began to have children. Their daughter, Abby, nicknamed Babs, was soon followed by John D. Rockefeller III, who was heralded as the richest baby in history. Newspapers gloated that the Titan could not visit his first grandson because of fear he would be served with a subpoena. With a rash of lawsuits now pending against Standard Oil, Rockefeller began leading the life of a fugitive, keeping his whereabouts secret. Kijket became both his prison and fortress, surrounded by Pinkerton guards. As the Tarbell series drew to its close, the federal government announced sweeping antitrust indictments against Standard Oil. Sr. was determined to carry on, confident in his own rectitude. Jr. could not.
Here was the son of the most controversial businessman in America, who had to figure out, by sheer force of character, a way to change the image and the direction of this family without openly repudiating this father he loved. He had to be both loyal to his father and loyal to his principles at the same time, even though his principles often differed from those of his father.
In 1910, John D. Rockefeller Jr. decided to retire from the Standard Oil Trust and devote himself exclusively to helping his father give away the family fortune. With Jr. at his side, Sr. launched the Rockefeller Foundation, endowed with $100 million. Its ambitious goal was to promote the well-being of mankind throughout the world.
Other people may have had trouble reconciling Sr. as the greatest philanthropist of his age. I think what's important to note is that Sr. never had a moment's worry. The notion that he gave away hundreds of millions of dollars to assuage guilt is nonsense. The notion that Jr. became a great philanthropist because of worry and guilt, not so easy to call. Jr. was a man plagued by self-doubt.
On May 15, 1911, the Supreme Court of the United States declared that Standard Oil was a monopoly in restraint of trade and should be dissolved. Rockefeller heard of the decision while golfing at Kykuit with a priest from the local Catholic Church, Father J.P. Lennon.
And Rockefeller reacted with amazing aplomb. He turned to the Catholic priest and said, "Father Lennon, have you some money?" And the priest was very startled by the question and said, "No." And then he said, "Why?" And Rockefeller replied, "Buy Standard Oil."
As Rockefeller foresaw, the individual Standard Oil companies were worth more than the single corporation. In the next few years, their shares doubled and tripled in value. By the time the reign of cash was over, Rockefeller had the greatest personal fortune in history, nearly 2% of the American economy.
And it was really losing the antitrust case that converted John D. Rockefeller into history's first billionaire. So that Standard Oil was punished in the federal antitrust case, but John D. Rockefeller Sr. most assuredly was not.
Rockefeller's lucky streak was not over yet. Just as the electric light bulb threatened to wipe out the need for kerosene, the automobile appeared. The market for gasoline sparked euphoria in the oil industry. Rockefeller's soaring fortunes made it seem as if he had outwitted his critics again. Increasingly genial and relaxed, he cast off his business suit and experimented with a variety of wigs. He delighted in the birth of Junior's second son, Nelson, born on Senior's birthday. 3 more boys followed: Lawrence, Winthrop, and David. With the furor over Standard Oil subsiding and the philanthropies launched, Junior was determined to give his children an inheritance they could be proud of. But his hopes of redeeming the family name were about to be shattered. In the fall of 1913, beneath the majestic peaks of the Rockies, a labor dispute was engulfing the coal mines of southern Colorado. It would engulf the Rockefellers as well, making the family once again the target of national outrage. The explosion came on September 23rd in the foothills near Ludlow. 8,000 miners struck a Rockefeller-owned company, Colorado Fuel and Iron, demanding more humane living and working conditions. CF&I immediately evicted the strikers from their homes. Families were forced to move into a makeshift tent colony beyond company grounds. The striking miners came from 32 different countries. Some thought John D. Rockefeller was the President of the United States. As both sides braced for a showdown, CF&I brought in gunmen and had them deputized by county sheriffs. Union organizers descended upon Colorado, including the fiery Mother Jones, who led a protest on the state's capital. In December, 4 feet of snow fell on southern Colorado. 20,000 men, women, and children shivered on the windswept plain. With no end to the stalemate in sight, John D. Rockefeller Jr. was summoned to testify before Congress. Although he was a company director, He said he knew little of the situation and had put his faith in the managers on the scene. Then he declared his faith in the open shop, the right not to join a union. An approving senior rewarded his son with 10,000 shares of CF&I stock.
Senior was no friend of labor unions, and Junior goes along without really thinking about it, without realizing that it is damaging the men who were working for him, without thinking about what it's doing to those communities, and without realizing what it can do to him.
On the morning of April 20th, 2 weeks after Junior's testimony, a company of 35 National Guardsmen stationed themselves on a hill overlooking the tent colony in Ludlow. When a shot rang out from an unknown location, the Guardsmen began raking the camp with machine gun fire, and a pitched battle began. Trapped families sought shelter from the bullets in dirt bunkers hidden beneath the tents. The cries of frightened children pierced the din of battle. At dusk, when the southbound local rumbled into Ludlow, families who had been trapped in terror seized the opportunity to escape behind the barrier of 36 freight cars. As the train pulled away, the brakeman reported seeing the tent colony engulfed by flames, lit, he claimed, by the torch of a soldier. The extent of the tragedy came to light the next morning. In a bunker beneath one of the tents, the bodies of 2 women and 11 children were discovered. The New York Times reported they had suffocated like trapped rats, more terrified by the bullets which whistled above their heads than the flames. Accounts differed, but the massacre had claimed at least 24 lives. Scores more were injured and burned. To many, there was no doubt who bore responsibility. For the first time, the full weight of public opinion descended directly upon Junior's shoulders.
Here was John D. Rockefeller, Jr., who was earnestly trying to redeem the family name, who was trying to distance himself from the family's corporate past and all these unscrupulous actions that his father had been accused of. And suddenly he's being accused of something far worse than anything that his father had been accused of, which was complicity in the deaths at Ludlow.
Angry pickets marched in front of Junior's home and his office at 26 Broadway. Speakers urged mobs to shoot him down like a dog. Novelist Upton Sinclair publicly indicted Junior with the charge of murder. Radical workers threatened to storm the locked gates of Kykuit. This especially rattled Junior, whose mother, Laura, lay inside the walls close to death. Then a homemade bomb exploded in a tenement, killing 4 radicals. It was believed to be destined for Junior's townhouse. But by December 1914, the miners' relief funds were exhausted. They were forced to return to work. It appeared to many as if management had won, but not to John D. Rockefeller, Jr.
John D. Jr. saw I could have the blood of these people on me and my children for a generation. And to his credit, he eventually saw that he had to take a hand not only in cooling out that situation in Colorado and making it right, but that he had a duty in some sense to regularize this unruly, turbulent field of worker relations in America.
One of the first signs of Junior's transformation came when he was summoned to testify before a government commission investigating the strike. On his way in, he stopped to shake hands with Mother Jones. "I have never believed that you knew what those hirelings out there were doing," Mother Jones told him. On the stand, John did something his father never would have done: publicly admit that he had been wrong. The young Rockefeller then promised to go to Ludlow himself and speak directly with the miners. As he was about to make his journey of atonement, his mother died. One of the first sympathy notes came from Mother Jones. In September 1915, Junior arrived in Ludlow. He refused to carry a weapon or have bodyguards.
He sees the way in which miners lived. He sees how thin their children are. He understands that there is no potable drinking water in most of the camps. He, in fact, for someone with a reputation for immense rectitude and shyness, comes out of himself.
Preaching a gospel of cooperation and Christian brotherhood, Junior laid out a plan for a panel to address worker grievances. He also promised the miners they would not be fired if they chose to join a union instead. His approach worked. The miners voted for his plan in a secret ballot. The usually straight-laced Junior took the hand of a miner's wife and gaily broke into a dance when a four-piece band struck up the Hesitation Waltz.
John's rearing as this child who had to eat plain food and wear plain clothes and be a plain little kid, he knew how to conduct himself with miners and families who were living in tents and who were living in great deprivation. He ate the food they had. He sopped up the gravy with his bread. It's a wonderful portrait of a man who, as it turned out, you kind of see Laura Spelman over his shoulder, realizing that she brought good to this boy as well as repression.
Selling the plan to CF&I management was not easy. Junior cashiered the Rockefeller agent on the scene. When his father's advisors protested, he brought in his own team.
When the dust is settled, Junior is running the show. And his father, by his silence, says, "Go ahead." And it's at that point that he really becomes the master of the house. Senior hasn't transferred all the money to him. In fact, it's after he succeeds in minimizing the damage at Ludlow that Senior begins transferring the enormous amounts of money to Junior's name.
Dear son, I am giving you 20,000 shares of the stock of the Standard Oil Company of the capitalization of $30 million. Go carefully. Be sure you are right. And then do not be afraid to give out as your heart prompts you and as the Lord inspires you. Dear son, I am this day giving you the following securities: 60,000 shares of Wheeling and Lake Erie Railroad. Dear son, I am giving you $65 million of United States government bonds. Affectionately, Father. Though Junior thanked his father profusely, years later he revealed darker feelings about his legacy. "I did not choose or seek to be the recipient of such wealth," he wrote. "It has not meant the greatest happiness."
He was terrified of receiving all of this money because he knew the pressure and responsibility that went with it. And it was particularly a source of tension because he had very little self-confidence, so that he was constantly worried that he would fall short of the demands of this great fortune.
As a boy, Junior had learned the biblical saying that it is easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven.
He was deeply troubled by the image of his father as a robber baron. And John D. Jr. saw his life's mission as trying to remove the taint that seemed to exist around the Rockefeller wealth and the Rockefeller family and the Rockefeller name.
Years before, Sr. had been warned that his vast wealth, like an avalanche, could crush him and his children and his children's children. Now his son Junior faced that danger. As he drove himself mercilessly to redeem the family name, the weight of the Rockefeller fortune would threaten to overwhelm him.
There's more about the Rockefellers on the web. Hear economist Paul Krugman's views on modern-day monopolies. Control the market yourself in an interactive game. All this and more at American Experience Online. American Experience is made possible by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting. And by the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation. To enhance public understanding of the role of technology, the foundation also seeks to portray the lives of the men and women engaged in scientific and technological pursuit.
At the Scotts Company, we help make gardens more beautiful, lawns greener, trees taller. If there's a better business to be in, please let us know.
Liberty Mutual Insurance is a proud supporter of the American experience. And by helping people live safer, more secure lives, we're also proud supporters of the American dream.